Be welcome, my friend. Eric is from Sendo Ágil. I'll let you introduce yourself and do your show, man.
Yes, Eric Adames. I founded Sendo Ágil about 5 years ago, and with the mission to try to bring to Latin America something that I consider very passionate to myself, and learned a lot of things over the years. I was born in Panama, came to the United States to study, and in that process made my whole life here, and have been very privileged to work in an environment where constantly learning and challenged, and I'm moving from one company to another. So I've been working as a consultant almost all of my life. Very few companies that are consulting companies that I actually worked for them. So that experience gave me a lot of perspective. You know, there's still a lot to learn, but a lot of perspective. I saw how companies were able to benefit from bringing someone in to give them a different perspective or a filter for them to understand where they are at and what potential solutions they could actually explore. And in that, I wanted to bring it to Latin America. So I started by visiting every country, meeting new people, talking to a lot of executives, then later began to train and consult. And now we are in the process of helping executives and helping individual leaders in understanding what enterprise agility is all about. And one key component is the one that I want to talk to you guys about today, which is accountability. Accountability is extremely important. And it's something that we usually do not talk about, right? So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to I hope you can see well, right? I'll go ahead and start here, because why did I call it the 6-syllable dirty word? To be honest, in the US, almost all the dirty words are four letters, 1 syllable. So everybody knows, you know, this specific joke. So accountability is the only word that I know has 6 syllables in English that is right on the top, rates right at the top in a conversation in the workplace with politics, religion, or sex. So people are just afraid to tell and have the accountability conversation. It's a very silent conversation. Everyone tends to want to avoid it. And when you talk about it, a defensive wall comes up. No one is direct. And with that, it is incredibly important that we try to bring this level of awareness of accountability, because it has a tremendous impact on the organization. The lack of accountability has direct impact on what we care the most in our companies. So accountability, why does it matter? This is what we're going to be talking about. My intention today is for you guys to be able to answer these questions and relate to it. And hopefully you become curious enough to continue digging into this and how it applies to your organization and how you can help your customers, your colleagues, and your companies, right, to engage into this conversation more openly. There are ways to have this conversation without it being so sensitive. So where do we start? Where does accountability start? We're going to be talking a little bit about that. I know we have constraint of time, so I'm going to try to go a little fast about how I cover this point. And what do we do? What do we do about it, right? What are we currently doing about accountability? Today, actually, I had a conversation with a client recently, and they said, I asked them, what are you currently doing today to instill accountability in the workplace? Silent. There isn't a very intentional approach to exercising, to fostering to measuring whether or not we are being accountable. That is a very scary thing, especially today in these very moments of crisis. Right now, accountability is the one thing that most executives right now are going to be totally detached from, because why? We're used to having the people in front. They are in the building. So I feel like something is happening. Now we are remote. So how do we hold them accountable? Before I walked in front of them, right? Before I was able to observe and see some things physically. But what about accountability in these moments? So this is when it's going to matter the most. So it's going to be important that we understand, why does it matter right now? What does it mean to your business? Because of accountability has a direct impact on results. Results, results, results. If we want results, and if we are focusing the organization in aligning, in understanding how the results, right, are going to be accomplished, measured, and also how is the organization moving forward, we need to care about accountability. I want you to take a look at some of this. In 2014, Partners in Leadership did a fantastic study. This study revealed that 93% of the employees don't really understand what their organizations are trying to accomplish in order to align with their work. 93%. Now think about this. So there's abysmal alignment in this. The second one is 85% of leaders are not defining what their people should be working on. And an equal number of employees craving clarity. Leaderships are not leading, right? So leadership is supposed to be providing clarity in order for the organization to align to something, to objectives that are measurable or more measurable. So leadership not leading is leading to a 85%. Wow, 85% are missing clarity, according to this survey, to this study. 84% of the workplace describes itself as trying but failing or avoiding accountability. There's one, as I was preparing for this, I called some of the executives I work with and I asked them about this. His response was, I think my executives are working harder to avoid accountability with tricks and metrics and different filters and protection than it is at instilling and fostering accountability. So in a place that has lack of clarity, in the place that has a lack of leadership, more than likely accountability is just simply a dirty word. So we need to care about this. This is serious. More than 70% of the people that were surveyed were pessimistic about the viability of their understanding of the key measures the organization had. How do we link all this to accountability? Why is accountability now something that we need to pay attention to in the context, right? In the complete context of how we're going to help the organization to actually move forward to their objectives. It's critical. It is so important. Why does accountability matter? Take a look at this. I'm not going to go over all of them, but just a few that I'd like to actually highlight. Lack of accountability has a negative ROI. Wasted time. Your overall strategic intent is sabotaged. Why? Because how can you expect for people that are not accountable, right, to help you move the company forward? Most of the time, it's because people are not feeling empowered or courageous enough to voice their opinion as to whether or not they believe the solutions or the recommendations or the approach or the roadmap or the request is the appropriate one. So we are forming a baseline of behaviors that cause lack of accountability in the way we lead. That is going to be very important for us to keep a conscious approach to how we are going to make accountability visible in the organization. How do we make it important in the organization? Accountability creates silos. It creates an us versus them culture. So if we're not accountable, right, and those who are, what does that create, right? So this group is doing better. This one is not. One is because of accountability is not being fostered and encouraged and incentivized, perhaps. We have to understand that if you don't hold people accountable, it's going to be difficult to attain certain strategic initiatives, to execute them properly. Your strategy becomes not clear enough. Your strategy becomes and gets in a moment of risk. Missed work due to selective accountability. This environment is very easily identified in many organizations that I've walked in and are trying to engage in this conversation. Selective accountability. How do you hold people accountable in one area and not in other areas? How do you hold other people accountable and others not? So one thing is to need to miss work, and another thing is to need to miss work because you want to refresh your mind, you want to recharge because the environment where you work, right, has this selective approach to accountability. Only certain people are held accountable. That is a dangerous place to be. We should not allow those things to foster. So we are responsible as leaders to make observation and make the steps necessary to holding people accountable. So important. And ultimately here, you can see turnover. In an environment that lacks accountability, the best people are the first ones to go out. Do we know that accountability leading to turnover when we already know that replacing an employee could cost 1 to 3 times the amount of his salary? Add on top of that, the reality that these are your best people. So lack of accountability puts at risk your top 10 performers, your top 10% of performance. So something to think about. Turnover as a result of lack of accountability. It could be very easy to ignore it. It could be very easy to pacify it. It's a difficult and uncomfortable conversation. Leadership has the responsibility to lead the way in this conversation. Why? Because leadership then takes a huge risk of losing its credibility. How many times have you been in an environment where you walk in and it doesn't matter, right? People tell you, it doesn't matter. The wrong people is getting promoted, but the right people are getting penalized. In one environment recently that I was working as a coach there. And the executive told me directly, and in his words, he says, in this place, the messenger gets shot. We shoot the messenger first. So be careful. So when we get that type of warning walking into an environment, could you imagine the impact on the rest of the organization? The amount of negativity in which the people are working on? Do you see this happening and impacting the way products are made? The quality of the product? How can you perform at your highest when you are already feeling a bad attitude? You walk in with a bad attitude. You feel it's an unfair environment. You feel that it's an unpredictable environment. Accountability has a whole lot to do with this. Let's take it seriously. Now, where do we start? It starts with you. It starts first. We need to take this step to own it. Owning it is a very important first step that we can all do immediately. Let's step away from excuses. Let's become more aware that excuses is the fuel to lack of accountability. The more excuses we begin to actually put into our conversations, the more the lack of accountability. Just a few days ago, I had a conversation with a team, and the first thing that they said was, I don't want for it to sound like an excuse, but what does that mean to you? So I was able to stop him right away and say, one moment, if it sounds like an excuse to you, then it is an excuse. So how do we rephrase that to not make it an excuse? How do we go about having that conversation that is difficult to say? And sometimes many people think accountability is just, I had to admit I was doing something wrong. That is not accountability. That's part of accountability. So we need to understand what accountability is. Here's one of the things that we need to ensure that accountability is very clear within the organization. Accountability cannot be delegated. You can delegate responsibility, you can delegate authority, but accountability cannot be delegated. So when we are dealing and working with sponsors in large initiatives, and the sponsored proxies, and do not make the accountability appropriate to that proxy, then we are dealing with a proxy that has no accountability. So what do we usually experience in that environment? It is critical that we begin to see this as a real conversation. Accountability cannot be reduced. Just because I gave you responsibility and authority doesn't mean I'm less accountable for it. I have to own it. We have to own it. Accountability is always upward. Accountability means we are answerable to someone. It's upward. We are answering to someone all the time. There is a saying that says, we all answer to someone. Whether it is the top executives, or where it is a large client, where it is our customer base, we are all, or our investors, right? Our stakeholders, our stockholders, we're all answering to someone. Accountability travels always upward. Accountability is unitary. A healthy environment ensures that people that are responsible for work are accountable to one person. There cannot be a shared responsibility. It cannot be a shared, it cannot be shared. I am responsible, the buck stops right here. Someone has to always point to that person that is accountable. Who is accountable here? It's unitary. And accountability is limited to the level of responsibility that is assigned and the authority that is delegated. This, and there are many other areas of accountability that we can actually explore. But I hope that you are becoming now more curious about accountability and its impact to your organization today. Right? What do we do? What do we need to do? Well, for the past 2 years, close to 2 years, I have been working on this about accountability and about how can I help an organization have this conversation in a way that is healthy, in a way that is intentional, in a way that is part of the formula or part of the approach to introducing the change and getting to the objectives the organization is striving for. So this, what you're looking at right now, the accountability framework that allows us to do what? To put into context accountability and its 5 top components as it is described here. For accountability to work, we need to have much clarity on all of these points. And clarity travels downward. Clarity of expectations, for example. How can someone be accountable to something they are not clear about? Clarity of their capabilities. Are you giving me the capabilities in order to do the work that will meet those expectations? Clarity of measurement. Can I measure myself against that, the expectation? Many organizations are not clear about this. Many organizations don't even have a very visible approach or framework, right? To actually exercising and encouraging leaders and their teams to exercise and experience accountability. Feedback loops. We need quicker, more pointed feedback loops for accountability to happen. I understand the expectation. I have the capability to do it. I know how to measure myself against those expectations, and I'm getting feedback from those stakeholders from which the expectations are important to. So I can adjust and adapt individually or as a team. And accountability comes with the difficult conversation of consequences. What are going to be the consequences of not meeting expectations? Let it be individually, as a team, as a program, as a portfolio, as an executive. Clarity in all of these points is one of the items that fuels accountability. Ownership is what usually is being observed as this key ingredient that leads to success. Anyone in any specific set of searching for or working towards a set of objectives without ownership, without that approach, without understanding that I need to have a sense of ownership over what I am doing, leading. Without ownership, we take a place of spectators. When problems become visible, when problems arrive, spectators then take a back seat. It's not my problem. When owners see problems, they become problem solvers because it is important to me. I own this. So a sense of ownership is very critical. How do we instill it? How do we teach it? How do we actually make it conscious level of accountability being part of our day-to-day effort to take the company forward? Accountability is not going to happen by accident. It is not going to suddenly appear. Accountability has to be implemented, has to be followed through, has to be paid attention to. Consequences need to be clear. And here's where we do not usually have these conversations. What are the consequences of bad behavior? It is very easy to tell someone, your code is bad. It looks like a spaghetti code, if it's a technical person, right? The architecture is not on standard. It's very easy to academically challenge somebody and give them consequences. But it's not easy to give consequences and have the conversation of accountability when it comes to behavior. We have great coders, great leaders, which are horrible in behavior, treat people wrong, speak horrible, treat people like nothing, without dignity. And I've been in those environments, I've seen it. And the rest of the leadership simply ignores it. Everyone can see it. So it becomes a silent, very silent sickness that the organizations, many, don't do anything about. So on the bottom of the framework, you can see repeat, reward, release. So based on that feedback, based on the level of clarity that we are providing, based on how we are measuring the team, person, group area, we can repeat what we just did, we can reward, or we release. I was in an environment where it took about 1.5 years for a director to actually be able to remove someone that was, by any means, everyone knew that person had to go. 1.5 years. How much do you think that cost the organization in credibility? How much damage someone in the wrong place, right, can do to a team? Organizations need to have an approach where it is a healthy approach, a healthy roadmap to releasing. Either we are moving them to another area where their competencies and their capability are more aligned to, where they can be successful, or sometimes people just have to go. It doesn't matter. It's a matter of timing sometimes. So that is not an easy conversation. Later, we found out in that client that the retention of employees that report to a director was part of the bonus structure. So directors did not have the incentive of cleaning that bad apple from the team. Because the bonus says if you start letting people go, that means that you're not being effective. Therefore, I'm not going to give you a bonus. This is a way in which automatically, by default, by process, we are encouraging a bad behavior that leads to lack of accountability. We need to have a reward process that is also positive. We need to ensure that we understand the impact of accountability. It's very silent. It is very difficult to engage in this conversation, but we cannot ignore it. If we really care about our organization, we will care enough to move to the next level. Accountability is a superfood. Don't allow it to become the dirty word. I hope that this gives you an indication and make you curious enough, because we are dealing in a day-to-day basis in organizations for us consultants. And if you're working in a place that you're going to be there or have been there for a long time or planning to be there for a long time, it is a very uncomfortable place to be in an environment where accountability is simply something to laugh about. Have the courage to engage into the conversation that perhaps may put you in the light of an outsider. However, it will create a totally new light where you demonstrate that you really care. Let's have the courage to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I'd like to take questions now, if it is okay with you.
Thank you, Eric. Nice speech. I still remember the first book I read about accountability. It was back in 2017. And one thing that comes to my mind is when we talk about accountability, we are talking about the behavior, right? And I'm going to use this word on purpose. How can we control that and make them people accountable?
Well, that's why I made this into this graphic. That's why I speak about it in a more tangible way. Because in order to have accountability, we need to have clarity. Clarity in these areas. That is the only way we are going to actually be able to have a conversation that is complete around accountability. As leaders, we are responsible for providing clarity to our teams, to our individual roles. If I don't have clarity of expectations, how can you hold me accountable? If I don't have the capabilities, I don't have no clear as to what skills I need, what tools do I need to accomplish that expectation, then how can you hold me accountable to something I don't know how to do? If we're not measuring me based on those expectations and capabilities, or if most companies don't even know how to measure. So they don't even have the metrics. How can you measure me? How do I know what success look like? And if you don't give me feedback as I'm going through and you just tell me I didn't do it and now I'm penalized, then how is that fair? Did I get an opportunity really to adjust, adapt, and transform to those new expectations? And And the most difficult piece, clarity of what are the consequences. Tell me up front, if I don't accomplish this, what are the consequences? Accountability begins to die almost immediately the moment that leadership ignores the consequences. Everyone, oh, nothing happens when you don't do what you're supposed to do. Nothing happens when you are not reliable. When someone is accountable, the opposite of that, in my opinion, is unreliable, irresponsible.
Amazing.
So, do we want to be unreliable?
Yeah.
By default, very implicitly, we are, if I am not reliable, if I am not exercising accountability, then by default, I am unreliable.
Yeah, definitely. We are short of time, but I would like to ask this: do you believe the accountability is the key to become how could I say that? Is the key to succeed as professional?
Well, it's a key to success to an organization, actually. There are studies that are being done that speak to accountability as the direct relationship to success in an initiative within an organization. So ownership fuels accountability. Clarity of these points fuels accountability, allows the organization to actually move forward in a way that's healthy, because it's a process of either repeating what's good, rewarding because we are winning, or releasing because we need to clean up. We need to fix things. So we have to exercise an approach, very tangible, very clear, something that can be followed through and easily thought within the organization. Hold people accountable is incredibly important for success.
Great. Eric, sorry, my friend, we are short of time. We're behind the schedule right now. Thank you again. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you,
Hope
guys.
everyone liked and enjoyed your presentation. It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the space, and I hope that you guys remain safe and healthy.